Managers and employers. Who was your strangest employee? Story 1. I hired a server engineer that I had a weird feeling about. I shook it off because my guys liked and had confidence in him. A couple of weeks in, he got a call from the Department of Justice working in a certain state verifying his employment. Strange, I've never had that before, but blew it off thinking it was a child support thing. We worked for a couple local law enforcement departments, so I ran his name through, and it came up clean. No criminal history. But I just couldn't shake my feelings. He then had to fly back to the city he moved from for a couple of days and needed time off. He didn't say why, nor did he tell any of the guys why. While he was gone, I decided to let him go. Everyone thought I was a shrew for doing it. They didn't say anything, but I knew. Fast forward a couple months later, I hear, "Holy hell," from my marketing guy's office. He started telling us to come. There he sat, stunned, looking at a Yahoo page. Back when Yahoo had actual news. The guy had hacked into a huge medical company and stole tons of personal information and trashed their network before I hired him. He had committed self-unaliving by stepping out in front of a tour bus doing 80 on a highway. Because he was found guilty and going to jail, he emailed his wife a self-unaliving note. The last line of the Yahoo article said, "Due to the horrific nature of the accident, the patrons of the bus company had to have extensive counseling." We all just stood there shocked to read it. Sounds like after that phone call verifying his employment came in, they were on to him. I guess he didn't cover his tracks like he thought he did. And I don't know what was going through his mind at this point. In a way, it's kind of good that this company wasn't involved when that he was let go. They probably, some way, might have been held liable. I don't know. Story 2. Kenneth. He never stopped talking. Asked all the girls for their numbers, didn't get any. Had to have numerous closed-door meetings about personal physical harassment, as if the court-mandated ankle bracelet didn't teach him that. And once he was finally fired, proceeded to come into the store as if he were still part of the team. Oh, he also meowed at customers and staff. Strange thing, he wasn't the only one who meowed. Another member we had, Robert, the pathological liar. He was enlisted in the military for 6 years, and his fiancée's mom tried to unalive him for the insurance money the Army gives. He won a 2012 Camaro from a contest, supercharged. Another employee offered to buy it from him to call him out on his hogwash, and even brought in the check. Robert failed to show up that day, and the car was stolen. He told stories about me to my staff from high school. We did go to the same school at the same time, but I am 4 years younger, so we only had one overlapping year. He was held back a year. These stories never happened. He worked 3 jobs and had over $50K saved up, even though his best friend got him the current job and told us none of that was true. He was a manager at a different chain store, but left because the owner tried to sleep with him. The owner does sleep with his managers, but this guy was never one. He could barely ring in an order. He was shot and stabbed, so he couldn't come into work, but the next day he was miraculously fine. There are lots more, but I honestly can't remember them all. The best part? He stuck to them all, never forgot any details, and never changed his story. He was a good guy, but man, you're not impressing anyone. He remembered all the details? It just sounds like everyone just knew he was lying, but really tried to press him to get him to slip on something. But keeping up that facade for so long is just incredible. Which one would you rather deal with, the habitual liar or the meower? Story 3. My time to shine. Guy named Austin. I'm what you might call middle management at work. I have a whole team of people under me, but 2 levels above me. I'm responsible for a lot of the day-to-day operations. Austin was hired as someone on an equal level to me. 6 years before I was hired. Within 2 months of working at the job, I surpassed him in proficiency and job knowledge. I was teaching him things daily. He had absolutely horrible customer service. He was one of the cockiest, most standoffish, most rude service industry people I've ever met. The collective rest of the team, including me, both above and below me, got maybe 2 customer complaints a year. He, by himself, had about 5 or 6. He finally left us over a questionable injury. He saw a ticket out and took it. Our company attorneys did some digging into his history as part of the court battle and found that he had quite a colorful history of leaving employers via workman's comp claims. It finally bit him in the butt, I guess. One of my favorite stories is the ex-con. Austin got really upset when people would come in within a half hour of closing. The biker guy with what had to have been a full body of tattoos, ripped beyond belief, really rough demeanor, came in 5 minutes to close. He had nothing but a backpack and said everything he owns is his motorcycle and what's in the backpack because he just left the prison. A part-timer was dealing with him. Dude wanted spark plugs for his motorcycle. Part-time guy was like, yeah, no problem, be right back. Austin walks up and asks what the guy needs. The guy chuckles and says, totally obviously joking, your other guy's already got me. You guys need to get your act together. Well, Austin gets all butthurt and starts verbally abusing the guy. They get into an argument. Austin tells the guy to leave the store. The guy is like, fine, I don't care, and starts leaving. He gets most of the way to the door, stops, and says, listen, man, I really need these plugs to get my bike going. I'm sorry, I'll stop talking. Just let me get my plugs and go. Austin is like, nope, leave. I was about to walk over and get involved because this is mentally challenged behavior when the guy starts walking out and mumbling about meeting Austin in the parking lot after work. Well, Austin heard and yelled out, why wait until after work? I'm here right now, butthole. The guy spins around so fast it was a blur, slingshots his backpack across the store, physically rips his shirt off and starts running towards Austin. Austin was on the phone with 911 faster than the dude could even take another step. The guy picked up his stuff and left saying, yeah, that's what I thought. Austin never lived that one down. Many more stories if anyone's interested. Oh, sure. Anyone would be upset if someone comes in that late, right before the store closed. But pick your battles, person, Austin. My goodness, this is just something simple. It's just spark plugs. If this guy was ordering 500 parts 5 minutes in, you might take a little bit of an issue, but still pick your battles. Yee. Story 4. His name was Harold. He was Filipino. During his time working with the company, he spoke maybe 50 words with me in 3 years. Almost every time was, hey, CS, baby, in his thick accent. I wasn't necessarily married when he asked me the first time either. I later found out why. He had an absolute fascination/obsession with breast milk. Yes, you read that correctly. Breast milk. Here's how I found out. When I quit, he decided to throw me and another employee a party, consisting nearly entirely of karaoke and beer. I don't drink, but Harold proceeded to get completely wasted. It was the most I heard him talk, and his wife was an amazing singer. It was shocking how they were the same height and build. Harold then asks me his famous question. CS, baby? No, Harold, no baby yet. Why do you always ask me? He then smiles a very creepy smile and stands up and signals me to come with him. We go into his basement and he opens up a freezer. This is one of those huge deep freeze type freezers that serial unalivers hide bodies in. I was sure I was going to perish. Then I see it. Tons and tons of milk. I knew instantly it was breast milk. I just knew. Harold, I won't sell you my wife's breast milk, I said. Certain he would be angry with me and chop me into little bits to feed dogs or something. Instead, He went on a rant about how healthy breast milk is, how good it tastes when you prepare it right. You should always drink breast milk when you're sick. He said it was a magical cure-all, and that it was all because God infused something in breast milk that would heal children of just about anything. I learned a lot about breast milk that night. Harold offered to sell me some. I declined as politely as possible and rejoined the party. I sang Spice Up Your Life last night, if you're at all curious. Too long didn't read? Filipino man doesn't talk, throw a party, shows me his collection of black market breast milk. I sing Spice Girls at 2:30 in the morning. Story 5. When I was a teen, I was the pool manager of a swimming pool. There was a weird kid who only worked maybe 3 shifts at my pool before the pool board president had him move to another pool. No one ever told me why, and I traded a very attractive young man to get rid of the weird guy. It was teen heaven, so I didn't question it. He got moved to the pool in my neighborhood, which was weird, but I didn't question it. He tattled to the owner of the company and to the neighborhood board that I was drinking on my day off at the pool, even though I was 19. So my boss was mad, the neighborhood gossiped, and my parents were ticked. I thought the guy was a jerkwad and just started drinking at other people's pools on my day off. Then the cops showed up while I was at work. I was sure it was his doing. How dare people have fun on his watch? They asked me if I was at my neighborhood pool just before my shift. I told them, yes, I was. I was waiting to be breathalyzed. I was literally just laying out and trying to even out tan lines. No drinking. So they asked me about my time at the pool. Did you have anything to drink? Yes, sir. Water. Were you with anyone? No, sir. I had to be here at 3. Did you leave your water bottle unattended at any point? Pause. I guess, but it's not like it wasn't in my sight. It's a pool deck. It's open. Are you sure? You didn't go to the bathroom or to your car? I guess I left it next to the guard table when I went to change. Have you drank from it since then? A couple of sips. Did it taste weird? What? Yeah, are they treating the water for something? Why? We're going to need you to come with us. That mother sucker poured bleach and Rohypnol into the other 2 guards working and my water bottle. Somehow, the weirdest part of the story is that they took me to the hospital to make sure I was okay, and that was literally the last time anyone talked to us about what happened. Holy hell, I hope he got arrested and was court-ordered serious therapy because that is beyond messed up. Story 6. Brian drove an old Honda Civic with a bad muffler, but he thought it sounded souped up, so he loved it. He was 22 with a 19-year-old ex-wife and 3 kids. She'd call asking for money for the kids, and he'd say, "Baby, I'm broke. You know I gave you $30 last week." Funny how the previous week he'd bragged about spending $80 on a big Honda tattoo. He had a bad tooth that he couldn't afford to have pulled, so it sat and rotted for a month. You couldn't stand to be within a couple of feet of him, but he'd always come over and hover over your desk while you silently puked a little into your own mouth. I forgot to mention that Brian was a temp, and the manager was always about to let him go. Well, one Monday, he called out sick, so the manager called the temp agency and told them we didn't want him back. They must have called him at home to break the news, and an hour later he walks in like nothing's wrong. We're all kind of staring uncomfortably at each other, and someone goes and tells the manager that he'd showed up. We're kind of hinting that maybe he'd gotten a call earlier that day, but he plays dumb, telling us that he was sick, but all of a sudden started feeling better, so he decided to come into work. 20 minutes later, a couple big guys from the temp agency came in and asked him to get his stuff. He looked confused, and we never saw him again, though we heard him leaving the parking lot due to that awful tailpipe. Nah, he knows what he's doing. He's just trying to get away with it. He was trying to skirt the line of what was acceptable that he could get away with, but unfortunately he crossed it in a big way. I've had teeth go bad before, and I know that smell. Ugh, I'd hate that too. Story 7. I have many. Not sure which one was more strange. Number 1. Guy in his mid to late 50s working as a delivery driver at a Greek restaurant. He was creepy to talk to, but never more so than when he told us quite proudly that his daughter is a stripper and that she's really good. He would know, as he regularly went to watch her dance. 2. A woman in her late 30s, early 40s. This was at a casual dining/fast food restaurant, so most of our employees were around 20. This woman seemed great. She was a quick learner, eager to please, etc. All good, until I get a text from the girl training her to close on her third shift. Turns out this woman believed that her mother was a white witch, making her more susceptible to demonic possession. Weird. Then she tells the girl that sometimes the demons scratch her at night. She comes in the next day with scratch marks on her arms, claiming that they prove that she is plagued by demons. 3. I was part of an inventory team counting liquor in the government liquor stores. There was a girl who showed up to one of them with a bike helmet on. No big deal, maybe she rode in. Nope. Turns out she doesn't have a bike. She just thought it would be safer for her to wear that helmet at work than to go barehanded. When asked to take it off, as it wasn't part of the uniform, she pretended that she didn't hear the request. Repeatedly. Story 8. Mr. and Mrs. Stilton. I received 2 separate resumes from a Mr. and Mrs. Stilton who had worked together at dozens of different jobs over a period of 15 years or so. They had started and left the same roles on exactly the same dates. The job I was recruiting for was a bog-standard telesales role, and the couple had lots of experience. Before I had read their resumes, I had received a phone call from Mr. Stilton, and he came across as a charming, silver-tongued salesperson. Obviously, once I received the resumes, I found it strange and started phoning the other companies to find out the score. It turned out that at first, they would only be taken as a team. If you wanted him, you had to take her. They all said that he was an amazing salesperson, but was incredibly possessive over his wife and wouldn't let her out of his sight. I spoke to their last manager, and he said that he fired them both after he hit her in front of everyone for looking at another guy. This seems to be a common theme. I found myself feeling sorry for her and wanting to assist. I asked Mr. Stilton to come in for an interview alone in a coffee shop. One of my female colleagues called Mrs. Stilton at the same time, asked her a few questions, and gave her the number of a helpline for women who are in abusive relationships. I have no idea what happened to them. Needless to say, I didn't hire them. Fair play for you for actually taking some action and trying to help her. Story 9. A long time ago, a girl came into my workplace. This was at a diner, for an application for serving. I asked if she'd like to fill it out now. She said yes, and sat down at a table. Our only large table, where there were plenty of two-tops available, so I got the feeling she hasn't worked food service before. I was the only one working in front of the house that day, so I was taking care of my tables. Then I hear snapping. I look over, and she's snapping at me. I walked over and asked if she was okay. "I want pancakes." Okay. Weird, but all right. I put in the order for her, brought the pancakes out, and kept working. More snapping. "I'm done with this." She holds out the application, which is covered in syrup. I gave her the bill, and she said, "I thought this was my employee meal." Turns out she was the girlfriend of one of our line cooks. The application was so drenched in syrup and pancake crumbs I couldn't keep it. Her boyfriend asked if she could come back to fill out another. I just said we had too many servers, so it wasn't necessary. That woman would have been a terror to work with. Snappers. Curse snappers. Except when they're pan-fried and served with a red pepper rouille. How was this person expected to serve? I agree. I bet she didn't serve a day in her life. She would probably be snapping at the customers, like telling them to pay their bill, or, "No, you're not going to be ordering that." Yeah, bullet avoided. Story 10. Manager's story. When I was 20 or so, I worked at a Texaco station that was both a gas station and an auto shop. I covered both parts. I pumped gas, state law in Oregon, nobody pumps their own gas, and worked as a mechanic in the shop. The owners were a husband/wife team that were a real barrel of laughs. I was billed out at $60 per hour flat rate, but I was paid $4.25 an hour hourly. This was 1995 or so. And the wife constantly complained to all of us employees how expensive we were, how much we cost them in taxes and other legal fees. The husband worked in the shop also, and if you did something he didn't approve of, he'd throw a wrench at your head and scream at you for an hour straight, except for when we did a good job. He wouldn't tell us we did a good job. He'd just brag about how much money he'd make off our labor. E.g., I replaced the head on a Toyota Supra, which took me all day. I made gross about $38 for 9 hours worth of work, and he profited nearly $10,000. I eventually figured out that they were cooking the books and mainly cheating us employees on taxes, telling us they're set up to withhold taxes while they were just pocketing the difference. I brought it up, and they fired me on the spot.
Please like and subscribe if you've made it this far. I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the video and have a wonderful day.
Story 11. Let's call her Tammy. Overweight, white, blonde, 23, from East Texas. Had an 8-year-old mixed-race child. Tammy was obsessed with wanting to be black. She wanted to name her daughter Latoya, but didn't know how to spell it. Named her daughter something else, but her mother thought the name sounded too black, so her mother, who also had her first child at 15, called her granddaughter Peggy Jean. Tammy could not spell or do simple math. She was our receptionist. Our company was a woodworking business. She was supposed to help me with simple quotes, but even though I drew a diagram on the plate glass window in front of her desk, she could not get the concept of a square foot. When she turned 24, she cried all day because she was so old. She told me a confusing story about how her brothers threw a dead alligator at her, some sort of shunning regarding her daughter. Her 6 siblings and her all grew up in different foster homes. Her life's ambition was to work for the DMV of the city we lived in. She did it too. The story she would tell us left me gasping in disbelief. She was really odd and one of the sweetest people I've ever met. Story 12. I had just been hired at a major aerospace engineering contractor. First day on the job, I noticed another engineer, who had worked there for decades, was dressed in a Victorian English-type dress. It was a week or so before Christmas, and no one said anything about it, so I just assumed it was a holiday costume. When you work in engineering, you get accustomed to some odd characters. I realized eventually that this is how he dressed, every day. Okay, weird, but whatever. Learned that this guy was the creative genius behind a lot of very profitable products for our company, some of which were literally revolutionary and advanced the state-of-the-art significantly. A bona fide genius. Also learned the guy's wife that he constantly talked about did not exist. He talked me into going by his house once after work to pick up some tools I needed, and everything in the entire house was white. White furniture, white accessories, anything non-white was inside a white box or white bag or white wrapping of some sort. About 2 years after I started working there, police came in one day and walked him out in handcuffs. Turns out he had unalived 3 paid physical intimacy workers and kept their body parts in his house in wrapped gift boxes with bows. White, I presume. When they were going through his stuff, they apparently found a huge collection of child corn. He has been awarded several patents for guidance system-related inventions while in prison, a few of which the company we worked for bought the rights to and put into production. Weird mother sucker. Story 13. Had an employee a few years back at the fast food restaurant I managed. Let's call him Jesse. He was a weird and scary dude. He had tattoos up past his neck and one on his face. I don't mind tattoos normally, but this was a bit much. And one was a juggalo hatchet man. His tongue was split like a lizard's. He did this for that very purpose, mind you. Would make inappropriate comments to our underage employees, including checking them out blatantly. He's in his 30s, and his wife looked like Jabba the Hutt. He would constantly snap my suspenders like creepers do with bras. And when I told him to stop, he started telling the other employees he wanted to smash my head in. After that, we fired him, and we had to have a police officer present, because I honestly feared for my safety. Luckily, he didn't do anything, and I never saw him again. Story 14. I supervised a man who had his family stay in the parking lot during his shift and had 2 dogs when he couldn't afford rent. He had no teeth and looked like an ex-Walter White crystal head. His pregnant girlfriend was pregnant for 14 months before she lost it. Never did she look pregnant, but only fat. He would tell me about his brother who would make money giving BJs. Then later in the week he would be talking about all the money he himself had stumbled upon. Oh, and he wore women's thongs to work on more than one occasion. Pregnant girlfriend was pregnant for 14 months? What? Story 15. I'd like to tell you about Sergio. I was the overnight manager of a supermarket. Every department was forced to schedule in useless Sergio. He was very unemployable, but no good solid reason to fire him. So after being pressed around every day, he finally landed in a graveyard. He lived up to the hype of useless. He had made it 3 whole nights. Then, on the 4th, he sailed out of the door. I thought, well, good, that takes care of that. Well, shortly after, our Russian floor crew guy came out of the bathroom cussing excitedly in the only natural words he knew for such an occasion. I had to be led into the bathroom for a visual explanation. Sergio had left us a farewell present of his soiled underpants, complete with soiled walls and floors, just balled up in the corner. No, he didn't. Nobody's that low. I threw up a little in my mouth. That's horrid. Story 16. This guy, Kenneth, he was in his mid to late 40s. Used to be a bad-to-the-bone guy and rode a motorcycle, and his mom passed away about 10 years ago, and he apparently had a nervous breakdown. He hasn't driven since, walks 5 miles to work every day, talks to himself, and doesn't buy anything. I don't think he has any food in his fridge because he's desperate for food every day, and I've never seen him turn down anything for free, even if it's the last bite of an old hamburger. I've seen him eating food and drinking half-empty soda cans out of the garbage, even though he's earning over $60,000 a year. He doesn't shower or wash his clothes, but by far the weirdest thing is a few months ago I saw him at the casino playing roulette, well-dressed, with an old lady posse surrounding him. That's actually really sad. His mother's passing really messed him up. Story 17. I once had an intern who would pray over every task we gave her. She probably lost 2 hours of productivity in a shift. Load the autoclave? 2 minutes of intense prayer. File these folders? Sign to the cross. Label these containers? 40 seconds of bowed head muttering. All total day, every total day. On top of that, we had to explicitly tell her each thing to do, or she would stand idly by her station in the lab and just look at us. I have no idea how she operated a vehicle every morning to get to work, let alone how to find gainful employment after her internship was finally over. Sounds like OCD mixed with hardcore religious fanaticism. Story 18. Gary. Hired him to do dishes at my busy kitchen. He was quiet. Real quiet. He'd have a crew of creepy kids about his age, 16, bring him beers at night, but I never saw him drunk. He had classic lack of effect. Never laughed, never smiled, didn't get it when people were joking or teasing him. After 6 months, I fired him. Tardiness and poor performance. Fast forward 4 years. Gary is charged with unaliving a woman and her son and burning their house down. He unalived himself before the trial. The detective I talked to was positive Gary had unalived at least 3 young women, too, all Asian or mixed. Just like my half-Japanese girlfriend he'd been hitting on before I fired him. Curse Gary. Yeah, curse Gary. Story 19. I had an employee who used to tell me wild stories, like her fiancé was part of the Jenner family and she didn't want the trashy Kardashians at her wedding. I should mention her fiancé was her ex-boyfriend's twin brother. She had no clue he existed until her ex-boyfriend perished by bringing a shotgun into a hospital and having a standoff with police until they shot him. His way of committing self-unaliving, supposedly because his devout Catholic religion wouldn't allow self-unaliving. I was in a constant state of what the hell whenever she worked. Story 20. I had a coworker when I was working in the food service industry. Fancy organic salad restaurant catering to high-paid government employees who would manage to casually slip the fact she had herpes into general conversation. Customers, coworkers, the boss, it didn't matter who she was talking to. It always came up. Oh, you have kids? I think I would like to have kids, but I would be worried because I'm not sure how they might be affected by my herpes during childbirth. You just got engaged? I can't seem to find a guy because I have to find someone who's okay with the fact I have herpes. Story 21. My husband works in HR and has told me some strange stories. Here are two of my favorites. Woman came to ask him if she could present to the other employees about the benefits of eating catnip in a PowerPoint presentation. A woman complained that she didn't want to wear her PPE apron because it made her vagina too sweaty, and she had to leave early to get it checked out by her doctor. I really want to see that presentation so much. Story 22. I had a guy who was in his 50s. He works for me in a blue-collar, labor-intensive job. He was overweight, diabetic, and a hard party kind of guy. He told the oddest stories, though, like the day he heard his 12-year-old son got his 14-year-old sister's schoolmate pregnant, or how his nickname was Angel, proceeded to show giant wings tattooed on his back, which he earned after sleeping with a paid spicy worker that everyone nicknamed Lucy Fur. Odd times, man. This guy should be a character on Supernatural. Story 23. Tropical fish store. Had a Filipino employee that would consistently eat the fish food and the fish. His favorite was the flake fish food, and he had big buckets of it. He had a goatee, and I would go in the back. Sam, have you been in the fish food again? No, while his goatee was full of fish food flakes. I finally caught him back there just snarfing down handfuls of the stuff and taking dead fish out of the dumpster to take home to cook. Not a bad guy, though. That's what happens when you hire Zoidberg. Story 24. Someone I was managing threatened to leave the team at quite a critical time if I didn't buy him a better chair. I bought him a better chair. He left anyway. I forgot to expense the chair. Now that I think of it, this doesn't sound as odd written down as it was at the time to me. He made an unreasonable but not completely outlandish demand in an attempt to get fired so he could collect unemployment. When that failed, he left. Story 25. 2 months ago, I got a new job as an IT supervisor. I'm in charge of 3 techs and 2 analysts. The team includes Dwayne, a 50-something desktop support technician, cries at least 3 times a week in the office, has been warned twice about viewing anime corn at work, walks with a cane and a very pronounced limp unless he thinks no one is around, then he walks perfectly normally. He will randomly make animal noises throughout the day. Story 26. Bob started on a team of mine and told me straight out that he was gay and used to be a preacher. Neither means anything to me. But 6 months later, he told me he really wasn't that gay and he never was a preacher. That's so, Bob. Story 27. Sam the Wolfman believed he was a werewolf. He would ask for full moons off, and if you scheduled him for one of those nights, he would be a no-show. Bossman kept him on because when it wasn't a full moon, he was a damn good worker. Story 28. Philip. We worked at a movie theater together, and he used to count back people's change in pennies with a robot voice. He wouldn't actually give them pennies, just tell them the amount of pennies in a robot voice.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.